I'm sorry. I said it to this chair yesterday. A literal piece of furniture that I bumped into. Most people think this is just a nice person habit. Or maybe they just think I'm exceptionally polite. You know, Canadians say sorry every 2 seconds. But what if I told you that every time you say, I'm sorry, when you've done nothing wrong, your brain isn't actually trying to be polite. It's actually convinced you are currently being hunted. We aren't talking about manners here. We're talking about a hidden, sophisticated survival tactic called fawning. It's the fourth survival response most people have never heard of, and it's arguably the most exhausting one, because it forces you to disappear while standing right in front of someone. Today, we're going to figure out why your brain thinks being a doormat is the only way to stay alive, and we're going to find that version of you that got lost along the way. But first, we have to talk about the salt and pepper incident, which explains everything about your current relationships. Segment 1. The invisible wound. You know that feeling when you're in a conversation and you can feel the other person's mood shift before they even speak? Most people never realize this about themselves, but if you're a fawner, you have a superpower you never asked for. You can read a room like a high-tech sonar system scanning for minds. In psychology, we've all heard of fight, flight, or freeze. But there's a fourth F, fawn. While fight tries to overpower danger and flight tries to run from it, fawn is much more clever. It tries to disarm the danger by being the most helpful, agreeable, and loving person in the room. It's also known as the submit response. Think about a character we'll call Sam. Sam is the person at work who says yes to every project before he even checks his calendar. He's the friend who changes his opinion on a movie the second he sees you didn't like it. On the outside, Sam looks like a saint, but on the inside, Sam feels like a fraud. He's terrified that if he stops being useful or pleasant for even 1 second, he will be rejected, abandoned, or attacked. This isn't just a personality quirk. It's a survival mechanism that usually starts when we are very, very small. For Sam, and maybe for us, the environment at home was unpredictable. Maybe one parent was explosive, or maybe they were just gone emotionally. In those homes, a child learns a terrifying truth. My safety depends on making sure the adults around me are happy. And that brings us to a shocking discovery in neurobiology that explains why your body might be falling apart, even if your life seems fine on paper. But before we get to the biology, we have to look at the roots. There's a story in the research about a young girl who watched her mother painstakingly prepare a massive, beautiful meal. The house was spotless. The kids were well behaved. But when the father sat down, he didn't notice the feast. He noticed that the salt and pepper shakers were missing from the table. And he punished her for it. Not with a hit, but with a cold, emotionally abusive silence that screamed, "You are not enough." Watching that, the girl learned a lesson that changed her brain structure. Perfection is the only shield against pain. If I get every detail right, I won't get hurt. Most of us don't realize that our people-pleasing is actually us still trying to put the salt and pepper on a table from 20 years ago. We are stuck in a loop, replaying a survival script that we don't even need anymore. Segment 2. The gas and the brake. Here is a fact that might stop you in your tracks. Chronic fawning is physically destroying your body. A trauma practitioner named Karen noted that when you are constantly hypervigilant, scanning for danger, but also trying to look calm and helpful to appease someone, it's like trying to drive a car with your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. Your sympathetic nervous system, the gas, is screaming, "Danger!" while your social engagement system, the brake, is trying to force you to smile and be polite. This is why so many people who over-apologize also struggle with migraines, chronic back pain, and mystery stomach issues. Your body is literally being torn in 2 directions by your own survival instincts. We have this thing called the social engagement system. It's the newest part of our brain, and its job is to help us connect, play, and love. But when we don't feel safe, our brain skips connection and goes straight to protection. Have you ever been in an argument where you knew you were right, but your voice started shaking and you found yourself apologizing just to make the tension stop? That is your brain abandoning yourself to protect your life. In that moment, you don't have a sense of choice. You have a loyalty-based need to stay attached to that person, even if they're hurting you, because your lizard brain thinks isolation equals death. And this leads us to the elephant in the room, the biggest cost of being a pleaser, and it's something you might not even know you've lost. Now, in a minute, we're going to talk about a weird psychological phenomenon where your brain actually creates parts of you to act as bodyguards, and how those bodyguards might be the ones currently running your love life. But first, we need to address the "I need to send this to someone" moment. Segment 3. The loss of self. Most people think that fawning is just about being too nice, but the research shows it's actually something much deeper. It's a loss of self. When a child has to adapt who they are to fit what a parent needs, they stop developing their own identity. They become a human doer instead of a human being. They learn that their value isn't something they have, it's something they have to earn. If you are the person who feels guilty for saying no, or if you feel like an imposter even when you're succeeding, it's likely because you've spent your whole life being a false self. You've built a version of you that is perfectly calibrated to make other people feel safe, but that version of you doesn't actually exist. You are an expert at taking care of everyone else's garden while your own is overgrown with weeds and forgotten. This loss of self is the real trauma. You aren't just polite, you are invisible to yourself. You've traded your magnetic north, your inner guidance system, for a sonar system that only cares about where everyone else is standing. Why is it so hard to stop? Because of the glue, specifically, shame. Shame is the fear that we are fundamentally bad or not enough. We think, if I'm not being helpful, I'm worthless. The research tells us that shame is a body-deadening emotion. It's the whisper in your ear telling you that you don't belong. And for a fawner, being a good girl or a nice guy is the only way to keep that shame at bay. But here's the kicker. The nicer you are to cover up your shame, the more you feel like a phony, which actually creates more shame. It's a cycle that never ends until you learn how to do the one thing fawners are terrified of: getting angry. Segment 4. The sacred no. Wait, Patchman, did you just say I need to get angry? Yes. In fawning recovery, anger isn't a bad thing. It's a protective force. You know that feeling when you finally snap after weeks of being treated like a doormat? Most fawners feel terrible after that. They feel guilty. But that anger is actually yourself finally waking up and saying, "Hey, I matter too." Recovery from over-apologizing isn't about becoming a mean person. It's about completing the cycle of trauma. Dr. Peter Levine discovered that trauma happens when we get stuck in a survival response. For us, we got stuck in please and appease. To get unstuck, we have to do two things that feel impossible. 1. Angering. Aggressively complaining about the injustices we've faced, even if it's just to ourselves or a therapist. We have to say no to the inner critic that tells us we're worthless. 2. Crying. Real, unashamed grieving for the child who had to trade their identity just to feel safe. Every time you say a no to someone else's unreasonable demand, you are saying a sacred yes to yourself. You are rewiring your brain to believe that you don't have to shrink to be loved. We've covered a lot of ground, but here is the revelation I want you to walk away with. You aren't broken. If you are a fawner, you've probably been told you're too sensitive or too much your whole life. But your sensitivity was actually your brain's brilliant way of keeping you alive in a world that felt unsafe. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just a smart kid who figured out how to survive. The self you think you lost? It's not gone. It's just lost, which means it can be found. You are like a house where the power has been out for a long time, but the wiring is still there. You just have to learn how to flip the switch. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have an opinion that someone else doesn't like. You are allowed to exist without being useful. You are okay just as you are, and you don't have to apologize for existing in the same room as everyone else. If you found yourself in Sam's story today, maybe it's time to stop apologizing to the chairs in your life. If you learned something from this video, please give it a like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This is Patchman. I will see you in the next video.